This is an audio sample of Living a Double Life by Darnella Digas, from the Courageous Overcomers Anthology. My Uncle Ned was generally a quiet guy. He wore life loosely as though he were young and single without a care in the world. But if there was a gathering and boisterous laughter filled the room, you could be sure that Uncle Ned was at the center, dazzling onlookers with his wild tales. When he drank, however, he spilled the beans, letting his deepest thoughts run wild like a chicken escaping a coop. Daddy used to say, if you get a man drunk, angry or his passion stirred, you'll hear exactly what is on his mind. This was true of Uncle Ned, who had an entirely different disposition when he was sober. It didn't matter that Aunt Julia heard his stories when he was drunk, he didn't remember, but she did, and she kept them close to her aching heart. My early impression of marriage. One of the things Uncle Ned used to say was, marry a young gal, keep her busy and in the dark. The simpler she is, the better it is for you. The people roared with laughter, knowing that Ned did indeed have a wandering eye and a trail of indiscretions with young ladies who had no exposure to the things of the world. Everyone knew that Julia was many years younger than him. Aunt Julia listened quietly. She was caged, had no money and nowhere to go. I felt sorry for my aunt. She had become broken and bitter, the two things I vowed would never happen to me. I knew I would be different, I would be better, and my husband would love me completely. I would outserve him and outlove him, he wouldn't be able to escape my love. I believed that, and nobody could change my mind on the matter. I lived a sheltered life with my sister, brother, and parents. Daddy died just before I went to college, but when he was alive, he treated Mom like royalty, such love and respect. I wanted the same kind of relationship. Marriage was what I dreamt of. I wanted my knight in shining armor to love me as Daddy loved Mom. When I went off to college, I met Mike, a young jock in my art class. He had an irresistible charm about him, his eyes sparkled, and I was mesmerized by him. Mike could have had any of the other girls on the campus, but I was flattered because he chose me. He called me a Bahamian beauty. I was a 5'6" brown-skinned gal, well endowed with large breasts and buttocks, a typical island girl who the American guys considered exotic. I believed it was love. Despite my Christian upbringing, I melted when Mike made advances toward me. I loved the attention he lavished on me. He told me I was the only one for him, and I believed him. It didn't take long for Mike to charm me right into his bed. It was my first time, but not his. I was a well-planned conquest. Mike was excited about the pursuit but wasn't keen on having a relationship. His idea of a relationship was sexual engagement, which became too frequent for me, but he assured me it was the norm. When I found out that I was pregnant, Mike accused me of seeing someone else, claiming the child was theirs and not his. Heartbroken, I went home to have the baby. I was ashamed of the rejection but loved Eric, my beautiful healthy son. Mom kept Eric while I completed my college education, and I was grateful. 2 years later I met Jimmy. He wasn't anything like Mike. He accepted Eric and asked me to be his wife. We had so much in common. I was a set designer, makeup artist, and budding actress. Though he had a mentorship program for young actors, Jimmy was a playwright and director by profession who traveled to New York and Los Angeles whenever the opportunity availed itself. During our courtship, Jimmy and I were never intimate. After we got married, we were rarely intimate. I thought nothing of it. Jimmy was my best friend. We were busy making waves with our careers. So much so, that we were dubbed a power couple among our peers. Several years into our marriage, the criticisms began. At first, they were subtle remarks that gnawed at my self-esteem. No matter what I did, there was a comment. I became extremely self-conscious. My breasts were too big, I waddled instead of walked, my style of clothing was unattractive, my laugh was goofy, my hands and feet were unattractive. I began to wonder what was right with me. Why didn't he like my hair? Why didn't he say so before? What about my clothes? Do you really have a problem with how I sit, talk, and smile? Rather than arguing, I did my best to improve, asking God to help me to be a better wife and friend to the man I loved and committed to for life. During my private prayer time, rivers of tears flowed from my eyes. I wanted to improve. I had to be the woman he wanted. After crying and lamenting before the Lord, I got up and served my husband, preparing his meals and taking care of him the best way I knew how. Whatever it took, I was committed to improving. Whenever I left the house, Jimmy wanted to know my every move. I was flattered at the attention. I thought despite his unkind words, he really cared for me. He was like the satellite in a spy movie called The Eye in the Sky, always tracking my whereabouts. My exact movements had to be known. When he called, I happily told my friends, family, and even people serving me in the store that it was my husband checking on me. I let them know that I had a man who loved me and wanted to make sure I was safe, especially with the heightened crime on the streets. Granted, a few looks were awkward, but I chalked it up to jealousy. Those girls wished they had a man in love with them as my Jimmy loved me. Then came the unsettling feeling in my heart. I had been praying for so long for God to direct me, to fix me. I was sure that I was the broken one. Something was not right. I confided in my best friend tearfully, who suggested I do some investigative work of my own. She needed to know if I could handle what I might find out. I knew I just needed the truth. We were already heavily invested in our marriage of almost 35 years. My friend had a plan and I followed foot to foot behind her to achieve it. Hours after we implemented the plan, notifications began to roll in when Jimmy returned from work. To my complete shock, I discovered that my husband was not only addicted to porn, but he was gay. My world began to crumble. Now I knew why he wanted to know my every move. I was duped. I had become the girl Uncle Ned joked about, the girl who was always busy, naive, and clueless about what was going on right in front of her. I said it would never be my lot in life, yet I in a worse predicament than Aunt Julia. A time to think things through. I decided that I would take a trip. I needed to clear my head. Strangely enough, I noticed Jimmy didn't want to know my every move while I was away. As long as I traveled, he had the run of the house. He could lavish himself on porn for days on end, or as I discovered later, he could bring his lovers into our home, into our bed. This has been an audio sample from Courageous Overcomers Anthology. For more information on how you can secure your copy of this book, visit booksbybethel.com/courageous-overcomers.